Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon and today I am back to tell you about a new favourite book of mine. I haven't done one of these videos for ages, but there is a book that I have mentioned briefly on this channel before and also actually on my mother's channel that I just wanted to give a little bit more time and attention to because I do think it is a really great book and it's one that I really want lots of people to read. I think lots of people are reading it, but I would like even more people to read it. Now, before I tell you about what the book is, I just want to mention that this is going to be a bit of a, I was going to say quick and nasty video, but it's not going to be nasty, it's going to be nice, but it's definitely going to be a quick edit where I sort of top and tail it and then put it live. I have got some vlogs and a wrap up incoming. I just need to find a little bit more time for editing at the moment, which is proving tricky with the new project that I'm working on, which I will be vlogging about and stuff, so more on that in due course. But yeah, so I don't think this will be a surprise to you as to what this book is, because I think I've made it very clear how much I adore it, but it's The Bandit Queens by Perini Schroff. I'm even dressed in the same colour. I realise this is the same colour I was wearing in the last thumbnail. I do change my clothes, I promise. However, at the moment, I am very drawn to pink. And that said, I don't know how drawn to this I would have been if it hadn't been for reading. Actually, no, I think I would have. Had I come across it, but I came across it because of the Women's Prize for Fiction. It was longlisted. I am slightly gutted that it hasn't been shortlisted. However, I have seen so many people raving about this book that I feel like this is going to really find its own audience. I'm sure it's going to be turned into a TV show and all sorts. Anyway, why I love this book, oh, let me count the ways. I can think of several, but the first reason really is Gita, the main character of this novel. And Gita is a woman who many in the village that she lives in believe has murdered her husband because he's not been seen for a very long time and sort of disappeared overnight, and so have ostracized her and become very wary of her. And while this looks at Gita's loneliness in some ways, even though she's part of a group of women who help borrow and loan money together, she is very much on the outside. And yet I think one of the things that I loved most about this book, or found particularly poignant about this book, and there are several things, but first up with Gita, was the fact that she actually embraces this loneliness, which is not quite independence, but sort of is, because she does rely on other people. But it's how she has used fear as a kind of freedom. And I thought that was really fascinating. The way in which, you know, Gita has got like little kids think that she's a witch, and there's a lot of questions around like, you know, what she might do to them, which I hadn't seen it from this perspective before, because often I would think, oh gosh, that poor woman, like, and you do feel sorry for Gita. Sometimes you want to shake her and just say, come on, you know, embrace people a little bit more, particularly one person as the book gets going, but I don't want to do any spoilers, and there won't be any spoilers in this, so if I'm sounding vague at any point, then that's for why. But yeah, this look at using fear as a freedom, and the fact that because people just leave her alone and don't get involved with her much, even though they are talking about her behind her back, which she knows, she actually gets quite a lot of freedom and quiet in a society where there are certain expectations of women. And also the fact that having been in a abusive relationship, this is time of quiet after what has been a really difficult time for her. And yeah, I just found that really powerful and quite a different setup, because, and a lot of people said when I started this, because I got really excited about this book basically because of the beginning of the blurb. And for those of you who've been around a while, you'll know that I'm not a big fan of blurbs. I tend to read them, sort of semi-forget them, and then get a book however long later if the sort of ripples of the blurb are still positive in my mind or have still hooked me in some way. But this, I was just like instantly, yeah, because it says Gita is believed to have killed her vanished husband, a rumour she hasn't bothered trying to correct, because a reputation like that can keep a single woman safe in rural India. But when she's approached for help in ridding another wife of her abusive drunk of a husband, her reluctant agreement sets in motion a chain of events that would change the lives of all the women in the village. And yeah, that to me, I was like, oh my goodness, that just sounds so amazing. And lots of people said, Simon, it is very funny in parts and it is really gripping, but also it is really traumatic because it does highlight. In fact, I wouldn't say it's really traumatic, but it is traumatic. Would I say it was traumatic? I don't. It's a difficult book to read. That's how I would describe it. I'm very wary of using the word trauma or triggering too much, but there is domestic violence in this book. However, we don't see it in too much detail. It does happen, and actually I'm thinking as it goes along there is one particularly violent scene, but what I think this book does so cleverly is use humour to highlight the situation of these women, both in the fact that when things are awful, there can be moments of humour, not like obviously while violent things are happening, but like nothing's ever as black and white as we sometimes make it out. I don't know whether that's something that we do to make ourselves feel better about stuff, or to be a bit more like, well, this is right, this is wrong, there's no shades of grey in between. Or I feel like I've gone off on a tangent, but basically I should have made notes, but I'm not going to. But yeah, so that premise was definitely what got me into it, and I think this book actually delivered because of what it looked at with these women in this village in India who are kind of away from the big cities, but nevertheless really big things are happening to them. Because I do think sometimes we forget about rural society. It's a bit like we forget about people who might be in difficult relationships in rural areas, just like we might forget about rural poverty, or we might forget about, I don't know, almost like crime doesn't happen in the rural areas because it's just so lovely and countryside-y, and actually some really sinister things can be happening. I thought that was brilliantly done in here too, because we do go to the big city where Gita does kind of get involved in some shenanigans and some wrong-uns, but again, that just added this extra layer and almost like flavour to the book, and that I found really interesting because the sort of crime element there is quite comic, and I do think Perini Shroff is an absolute genius with comic timing, because she'll write something and you'll find yourself laughing, and then she'll pull like the rug from under your feet and show how awful what like something is very, very quickly. So you go from this real ha to and it kind of adds to the shock when bad things happen. I thought she did that brilliantly, and also she'll do it the other way. So there's one conversation with lots of the women where they're all talking about the foibles of their husbands and how some of them would like to be rid of them. And then one wife is asked and she's like, nah, he snores a bit, but actually he's all right. And I thought that was really both brilliant in terms of like adding this sort of sprinkling of humour. It reads better than I just told it, just to say, but also how this book could be a bit black and white in terms of men are all awful, the end, but actually there are some men in here who have good qualities to them. It's not like it's a man-hating book, it's a we don't like men who behave like absolute arseholes kind of book. And I think that is again where Perini Shroff has kind of given us these sort of different elements in order for it to be fully fleshed and not be one note or one directive or one point to get out of the book. There's so much more there, because she does also look at things like class and caste, which I found really, really fascinating to read, and is something that I knew a little of, but this definitely helped highlight. And again, this book for me is kind of one of those books where you just get so much more out of it than you think that you're going to as you start reading it. The other thing that I really, really thought was brilliantly done about this, speaking of the women, is how this is a book about women coming together, but they don't have to like each other. And that's another thing that I don't think is always done that often. Not because I'm saying that books should all be about women not liking other women, but we're human beings, we all have foibles. Sometimes there's just a chemical reaction with someone and we just don't get on with them or gel with them for whatever reason. But also it looks at the complexities of that, and how sometimes in order to do something for the greater group, you have to kind of bite your lip. I mean, Gita is not very good at biting her lip, and that is something that as a character I just loved about her. She's quite cranky, she can be quite snarky and quite tetchy, and I love the fact that she's absolutely foul-mouthed and doesn't give a but yeah, that's the other bit that I loved. I feel like I'm going around in circles because I'll come back to Gita, but there is one particular area that I found really fascinating with this. And this book looks at friendship in a really interesting way. So again, it's that coming together of a group initially that Gita is in because it is financially beneficial to the group, although sometimes to the detriment of one particular member because they are sort of loaning each other, borrowing money, etc. together, and having to repay that, and sometimes some can and some can't. But it's how this group of women who, like I said, don't really have that much in common in terms of being friends, but their situation brings them together. And yet at the same time, it does look at friendship in a really interesting way when it comes to Gita and Saloni, who were, well, when we start reading the book, they clearly just really don't like each other. But we soon, so this isn't a spoiler, get to realise that actually at one point they were really good friends. And then we find out that for why. And again, I won't spoil that for anyone, but I just thought that was brilliantly done because this looks at the complexities of friendship, and it looks at how sometimes we have to befriend people even if we don't necessarily want to, but also it looks at the heartbreak of friendship and the loss of friendship, and also finding friendship in the most surprising of places, be it with people, be it with Gita and other women, or indeed in the case of a rather mangy dog who I absolutely loved. And then, if that wasn't enough, another thing that I really, really, really loved about this book was the fact that it brought to life not only what was going on or is going on with Indian society and caste, as we mentioned, and also what it's like going on in India with the cities versus rural countryside, but it brings to light a bandit queen who is based on a real woman who was called, let me get this right, Phulan Devi, and she was basically this bandit queen, which instantly makes me sort of transpose it onto a highway woman. I don't know if we had highway women in the UK. We definitely had highway men. I hope we did. I feel like I need to go and look that up now anyway. But I certainly want to go and look up more about Phulan Devi and find out about this incredible woman who every so often Gita kind of does this, what would the bandit queen do? How can I be more of a bandit queen? But I think this book kind of leaves you at the end feeling like, how could I be more of a bandit queen in whatever different way that might be? And that's a really powerful thing. And to throw in that, plus look at domestic abuse, plus look at all of these different societal issues in India, and be a book that is incredibly funny in parts, very poignant, very moving, have sort of a real cinematic edge to it. There is a scene towards the end that is very, very dialogue heavy, and I did think that was a bit scripty, and it was probably my only little wobble with the book. I mean, I was hooked while I was reading it, but I could certainly see it playing out as like, I think this would be a great streaming series. I think this would be fantastic as a series rather than like a film. You could really, really get into kind of more of the minutiae of each of the different characters, be it Gita, be it Saloni, be it Farah, be it, yeah, there's a whole host. And I think the way that she gives it that propulsion whilst also it being a proper character built and also kind of a character study in, like I was saying, loneliness and fear and freedom and being an outsider or othered, and how that can actually sometimes be a powerful place as well as a lonely place. That was so interesting. But to, like I say, add all of that social commentary, add all of the humour, all of the snark, which I really, really enjoyed, and it just be a book that you do not want to put down. I just think it's fantastic. So there we go. That is my 14 minutes-ish chat on the Bandit Queens. I don't feel like I've done this book justice, and actually it's one of those things where I want to do like single book reviews every so often for books that are really, really special to me, like this one. However, I feel like sometimes I'll waffle on for all of this time of like, have I really like pitched it, or am I actually possibly preaching to the converted, because I think a lot of you already love this book. So yeah, I would love to know if you've read it and what you thought of it. I'd also love to know if you've not read it and if you're now going to go and read it. And also I would love to know what the last book that you finished that you just kind of, I don't know, it was a book that you just fully experienced in all its different shades and all of that kind of stuff. Because yeah, I just think this is fantastic, and I am sad it's not on the Women's Prize shortlist. However, I do think, as I said, this will find a big audience of book clubbers who will love this book ridiculously like I do. It's one of my absolute books of the year. I'm sure that's no surprise to you after everything that I've just said. Anyway, I will hopefully be back over the coming weeks with some more vlogs, my April wrap up, all that kind of stuff. I hope you're all doing super duper well. I hope things are as lovely as can be. And yeah, I will be back with another video very soon. I'll speak to you all then. Bye.